Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Relief Podcast, where we interview different experts and leaders and learn more about their journey, advice, and perspective so that we can all get better. Today, my guest, Isaac Mashman. Isaac, welcome to the show.
Demetri, great to be here. Glad to have this conversation and excited to see where this goes.
Oh, thank you so much. So Isaac has a diverse background. He's worked in public relations, and currently he's focused on helping people clarify their brand position, their personal branding, and make sure that their corporate branding is on point. Because right now we live in a crowded, noisy world filled with distractions and diversions everywhere. So when you're trying to work your hardest, feed your family, and grow your business, you can't have noise. So what's a simple step that you help people when you work with them or start working with them, or recommend to anyone that people can do to clarify their message?
Well, the big thing is going from the place of being a consumer to a creator. And a lot of times people are online and they're consuming tons of content. I mean, think about how many marketing messages we get hit with every single day. Thousands, literally thousands. It's not even an exaggeration. And so if I was to start working with somebody, it would be, all right, well, you've been consuming for all this time. Why don't we go ahead and put you in the realm of somebody who's creating content or creating information, creating IP, whether that be a podcast, a book, a program, a training, whatever it might be. And that can be as simple as making sure their social media is optimized. And simple steps to this would be, what is your social media handle? Like whenever you sign up for a profile, this is as basic as we can go, but it's so impactful because so many people get this step wrong and they miss it. So if I was to create a new profile, am I going to go by the Isaac Mashman or Isaac 2352 or some random nickname? No, I'm Isaac Mashman, just like you are, Demetri. And so whenever I'm working with a client, it's running a Google search. Okay, what is showing up when your name is searched? What is ultimately representing your brand right now, and understanding where you're wanting to go and what we need to do to make sure you're positioned to basically meet those expectations.
Yeah, and then how do you go about, let's say, setting expectations? Because a lot of times we talk about setting our ground rules and understanding ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like, do you, I guess, check in with people to say, hey, is this where you still stand, like week by week?
Well, ultimately, there are three main reasons that I believe and that we believe a person is going to build out their personal brand. Number one is to make money, which is common. You know, you want to drive revenue to a business, or you want to sell something, you want to monetize something. The second is for vanity. So this is where a lot of entertainers fall into. Most celebrities don't want to make money as much as they want to be famous and have the spotlight. And then the third is the more mission or cause oriented individual, where there's a nonprofit or something that they're passionate about, something they want to drive awareness to. And so we always start with those three questions. You know, what are you looking to get? It could be a combination of all of them. And then from there, we go into basically the who, what, when, where, and why. You know, why are you wanting to build out your personal brand? Who do you want to be known as? And then how do we get you there? So we always start with education. What is personal branding? The mindset of the public figure. Then who do you want to be known as and how do we get you there? And so managing those expectations, it's like if somebody was to come to me and be like, I want to be famous within the next year, okay, that might be a little bit more difficult than I want to be famous over the next decade, or I want to make $100,000 with my personal brand compared to I want to make 10 million. So managing expectations and not offering guarantees is important. I think that guarantees are important when they can be achieved and when they can be proven. But otherwise, I mean, part of the reason why I got out of the public relations space was there were so many unrealistic expectations, and I'm all for being in the clouds and having, you know, massive ambitions, massive goals. I mean, mine are absolutely, but I know it's a 10-year, 20-year goal plan, not this will happen overnight and I'll have 500 consultants working for me. That's just not going to happen. And in PR specifically, the Forbes feature, the Fake Entrepreneur magazine, the Paid for Press, the Charge Newswire, the fake following, the bot accounts, the engagement spamming, all of those are unethical tactics that speak to instant gratification and lay a very weak foundation versus taking the organic steps or even some paid steps that would ultimately lay a strong foundation. I'd much rather a client go that route than let me go ahead and buy 100,000 followers. You just look pathetic.
Oh yeah, and one of my coaches kind of makes a point of pointing that out,
Hmm.
that you can earn it the right way and say, oh look, I've earned this many followers organically, right? Let's say I'm networking, right?
Hmm.
And you can obviously always leave your card or the scan feature, click here and add me, or simply just say, here's my Instagram,
Hmm.
Demetri Stakias, add it. And then somebody starts adding it, and now you have an extra follower, and it's real. And it's
Yes.
likely not going to go away. So now you start increasing your following,
Hmm.
your audience. And so I was of the consuming mindset of, well, maybe I'm not good enough to create. Maybe whatever I'm said has already been said, but hasn't been said from my mouth and from my viewpoint and perspective and experiences, right? So that's what leads to being unique. And then when it comes to ego, you mentioned most people do things for ego. So because of the ego was holding me back for not wanting to create content, saying
Hmm.
that I wasn't worthy enough. So I had to do all these mindset lessons to start saying, you know what, I can communicate. Someone who used to stutter, who didn't have the courage to ask out girls in time for prom. By the time I asked, it was too late.
Oh, come on with that mug. Come on now. Probably
Well,
had girls coming to you.
I didn't have the full beard back then. I just had the mustache, and it was kind of corny.
The beard is makeup for men.
It reduces years. If I had a fake ID for 10 years younger, somebody would actually believe it, because
Oh
you know what it
man.
is. You're as young as your smile, right?
Hmm.
And how you feel, and that grace and spirit that's within you, and the values you carry, right? So our core values, our personal values, they're who we are. They're our brand. And one thing that I was digging into some of your interviews today. I was really loving them, and I really enjoyed how you said, and I want you to actually go into this. Our personal brand begins when we're born.
Hmm.
How we carry ourselves, how we respect and listen to others, and share how that kind of can grow into who we are and what we offer as in our careers.
I can confidently say I'm probably one of the only people, if not the only person you've ever heard explain personal branding in that way. And I am 100% confident that that is the truth. That is the true philosophy of personal branding, if you will. And it's the most accurate depiction, because people believe that when you create a new Instagram account or a new website, you're creating a new personal brand, when it's so much bigger than that. Let me name off some historical figures such as Martin Luther King, Jesus Christ, the Prophet Muhammad, Buddha. Let's talk about King James, who commissioned the King James Bible, Genghis Khan, or Gutenberg for the Gutenberg Press. All of these are historical figures, or even more recent ones like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, George Bush, etc. Every person I just mentioned has a personal brand and is recognized way past the point of their death. And so once you get into this mentality that your personal brand is something that you've had from the moment you were born, your mom and dad named you. And I would argue that in certain circumstances, your personal brand begun while you were still in the womb. And they were telling their family and friends about, oh, little baby Demetri, little baby Isaac, the grandparents are shopping for the mom, all of that stuff, right? And so as you come out and enter into childhood, you're the class clown, you're the teacher's pet, you're the one in sports, you're the one in extracurriculars, you're the dumb kid or you're the smart kid, but all of these are characteristics about you. And then you enter into college and then your career and your profession. And the people who really have the most success are the ones who make the conscious decision to start building their personal brands and controlling the narrative surrounding their name, whether that is, hey, I've been featured in X, Y, and Z rewards. I've gotten X, Y, and Z certificates. I have done X, Y, and Z amount of time or service in the military. Every aspect contributes. Think about a resume. Resumes are reflections of a person's personal brand and their career. But to take it a step further, you mentioned earlier about kind of like that natural energy, that aura, those personality traits. That is the personal side of the personal brand. So if we were to draw a line down the middle and put personal here and brands here, the personal are the unique character traits to you. You're the only Demetri Stakias that has walked this earth with your exact series of circumstances and experiences. And I'm sorry if I butchered your name based off your face.
No,
I
no,
probably
you did
did.
great. No, you
Okay.
did great. You did
And
great.
then the second part of this is the brand side, which is the professional. What do you do to make money? And that is where you have the credibility and the authority come in. But credibility and authority, or I would argue and just say the professional side of things, is useless if you lack the personal characteristics. Most times. Unless we're talking about picking a neurosurgeon, I don't care what the neurosurgeon's interests are. I care about their profession only. I don't care. But still, if I'm going and choosing between this neurosurgeon to perform my brain surgery and then surgeon number 2, who has been featured in a bunch of critically acclaimed papers and has done interviews and has done research and received hundreds of millions of dollars in grants and research, I'm going to choose the second option, even if he might be more expensive, because his personal brand is speaking for him. And so this really comes down to the most deep degree of human connection and the emotional, spiritual side of things, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Well, I think it's, we're in a world where normal is crazy and crazy is normal.
True.
So, and normal is boring, and, weird is interesting, right? To be captivating. And you can't build a following off things that just stand out. I mean, what's Nike, right? Like Nike's, well, no, it's an ancient Greek god of victory. Okay, that was culturally appropriated by the Nike Corporation.
This is
right?
true.
If you really dig down deep, right? But that motto they have, just do it. Just take action, right? Move forward in some way. They're not saying you got to be number one, but just do something, right? So this idea, sometimes when it comes to branding and marketing and messaging, there's these giant checklists. If you're not posting on LinkedIn 1,500, you might as well not do anything. So then most people don't do anything, right? It's this overwhelm factor. And just like in sports, we got to jump off the bench and get on the field. What can we commit to?
I do believe that people complicate the content creation, the personal brand side of things. So if you're creating one piece of content a week and posting that on 5 platforms, that's better than only posting it on one platform. So you don't have to have some gigantic budget to start creating content and going from the consumer side to the creator side. Whether that be you take a video recording and you make a reel out of it and you post that reel on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you have that on 5 places. Now you're building your personal brand using 5 algorithms. And that's a much higher chance of going viral or getting some sort of benefit than just limiting yourself to one platform, that platform's visibility or lack thereof. Now, as you start taking it seriously, then you could spend more time and make more investments, and you might get a client from your personal brand. Well, okay, maybe you want to take, and just like you put 10% into savings, you take 10% and invest it into an AI software that can help do video editing for you, or an automating software that helps you post, whatever it is. So you start treating your personal brand as if it were a business, because it is. And a business makes money, and then that money is used to make more money. And your personal brand should be the same exact concept. But if you just want to be a local hero and well-known in your town and city, then great. But you need to be the number one realtor who has all of the different signs and all of the houses in the neighborhood, not just the one that has the family and friends, the family and friends guy, Susan's getting into the real estate space. That doesn't mean that your church group or that your mom or that your cousin is going to choose you just because you're related. You need to be the expert and the authority. And that is something we could get into, a deeper dive into if you'd like. But
yeah, please add on to it. Because just going on to you've heard the comment, like, people need to know you, like you, and trust you, right? So like you mentioned somebody at church, we know and like you, but do we really trust you? Yeah. We believe you, but like you said, a house is anywhere from 100,000 to $1 million plus, right? And we don't buy them too often, typically. So, if someone's going to guide us through the process, negotiate, inspections, financing, and not casually about it, but serious and committed, and responds to their phone and pushes that offer and pushes for concessions, and is going to war on your side and your ally. That's somebody who doesn't have to have 20 years experience. They could have 3 months, but if they're super dedicated and committed and loving what they do, like you said, it's attractive.
But it is so much easier to create new first impressions with strangers than to change the perceptions that family and friends know you of. So I'm thinking about, for example, maybe you get involved with real estate and you're in your church community. They're not thinking of you as the realtor. They're thinking of you as Susan, who always brings the casserole on Sunday meals, right? They're not thinking of, oh, Susan is the expert here in real estate, or let me refer. And I don't even believe that it's important that your family and friends know who you are and what you do professionally, as important it is for strangers to know who you are and people around you. Because I'm not one of these people that believe that you should be keeping business and family completely separate. I myself am working to build my consulting group into a company I can pass down to my future son or daughter and say, hey, you're taking over daddy's business, just like the old typical Americana way. I think that that is something that needs to make a resurgence, but not everybody's going to do that. And there's a difference between choosing the realtor who is at church versus the realtor who has all of the business in your local city. So here, for example, in Little Rock, there is a broker, and his name is Valentine or Valentino, one of the two. And he is on every single sign in my neighborhood. Doesn't matter what time of the year it is. He is always the broker that's listed on the sign. Like, he has all of the business. But it's interesting though, because I was talking to somebody whose parents were selling their house, and I was asking, I see that he's the same broker you guys are using. And the daughter said, oh, I think he's a little bit of a jerk. I don't like him. So, but that doesn't change the fact that he has all of the signs and the things around the neighborhood. But then you think about, how are people talking about you behind the scenes too? And if you're the realtor who's only about, let's go in and make the sale and do the close, you might have the business respect, but lack the personal connection. And so if you were to go and approach a deal and say, hey, wouldn't this room look great for your kids? Like, I myself would feel comfortable having my family sitting in this dining room or doing a slip and slide outside, or sitting down next to this tree and reading, things like that are even just small personal touches that will help you become more memorable and make more deals. Because I know that one of your focuses is real estate. Well, I feel like every time a woman turns 30 or a guy turns 30, it's like, and their career's going rough, they get involved with real estate and get a real estate license. Like, that's the cliche that's been seen through Hollywoods for 40, 50 years, because it is true. And it's like, do you want to be that cliche, or do you want to be that number one realtor in your city?
Well, not just realtor, it's your brand.
Investor, yeah, all of it.
Oh, that too. I mean, well, okay, so let's just touch my branding real quick, right? Real estate relief. Relief is what you get after you work with me, right? That you're going through stress, that you don't know who to trust. You're getting all these letters, whether they be foreclosure notice, not paying your mortgage, not paying your taxes, and not maintaining your property. So instead of losing it to the bank, to the tax, the auction, etc., you call 3054 relief. I'm going to help you. I'm going to assess your situation. Maybe we can sell a full price. Maybe we can get you a discounted offer right now, and you can move on, right? And you'll feel relief. And that relief is not just a word, but it's an acronym, right? Each one meaning something, right? So the R, for instance, is like restoring communities, right? I'm not here just to take this asset off your hand and sell it to an investor and they sit on it. It's going to be turned around and have a new family in there. Right, that's what's a driver for me. It's not an extra 5,000 or 10,000 of revenue. I'm not looking for the figures. I'm looking for the impact, right? And so you can see that, you can feel that, I guess, with the people you work with and the people we follow online, right? Real knows real, and inauthentic definitely spreads like wildfire.
Well, and if I was to dig deeper on that and ask you and go through like some different interview questions, for example, and turn you into the guest, I would be asking you, well, what about your upbringing led you to this? Because I can imagine there was probably a point in your childhood where maybe your mom was receiving a foreclosure letter, or there was certain struggles.
Thankfully, we're not there. Never were there. Always hardworking. Like my father's an immigrant, so he was an electrician. Worked during the day at factory, and then started his business at night. So and then when I was 4 years old, basically saved enough money to move to the suburbs so he could go to those better public schools. And he paid off the house in 5 years, because that's
crazy. Love that.
That's the I want to go to sleep knowing I don't know anybody money, right? Which right now I hope people aren't losing too much sleep over their bills. So we all have those moments of pressure, right? And to rise above the noise in the past was, I don't want to have any debt, but the downside of that is not leveraging, right? And we always have to leverage our capital, our assets across more opportunities, right? If I put all my eggs in one basket, I can't buy more baskets. So
And that upbringing and those principles that your father instilled in you have influenced how you're treating real estate now, not treating it like some BlackRock investment, saying, oh, I'm going to buy this house and kick out this family just because, and the dollar bill. So again, that upbringing coming from that immigrant background gives you a new perspective. And that also gives you a unique positioning compared to if I was in real estate and just talking about whatever you're doing, like let's say offering relief. I myself could go into this and approach this and share the story about how my grandparents had to sell their house because they were getting a fine of $250 every day because their roof had a blue tarp on it. And so they had to sell their house because that was the only option. So if I was to get in your position or like want to launch real estate, I would use that part of my story to connect with somebody else and be like, I've been there or I've seen what it is like. And that can impact sales and impact your brand and build what you're building,
Let me add to that. So specifically in 2008 and 9, right? That was a recession, right? It was a slow time in the economy. We didn't know what was going on. We thought the banks would crash. We thought money would stop coming out of ATM machines. There was a lot of fear in the market. No, seriously, like that's how much the fear was going on, so that we could have these massive bailouts that benefited some people but didn't trickle all the way down to Main Street. But in my situation, I had bought some properties to build on, but I needed to stabilize because income wasn't coming in. So I had to sell some of my land to another investor. So we made a deal, $30,000, 2 pieces of property. And with some of that proceeds, I would be up to date with another mortgage on another property, right? So we make a deal. And then 2 days before closing, the guy says, I need to cut the price, $5,000. And I said, for what reason? He said, well, the numbers don't work for me at that. I said, it's only $5,000. I said, it's not like you don't have money, right? He said, well, you could put it back on the market, wait another month. So he was testing me if I could wait that extra month, which I couldn't, right? Because I was getting the notices, right? And I didn't want to lose. And I had to defend myself because I didn't have an attorney so well that PNC Bank thought I was a lawyer. They're like, which law firm do you represent? I said, Pro Se. Now, so we still did that deal. That person was never a customer again. I'm not going to wish them harm or ill will, but guess what? You made a great transaction, but you have no relationship afterwards, right? So how many people do you want to burn off until your career ends? Do you want to make a career out of one-upping people? And does that feel good? And because at the end of the life, we square up with God. Right? Like, did we do good? Like, did we serve well? And that's so I look at that saying, you know what? When I flip the script and I'm the person helping that person, I'm not going to change the price just because I can. That's not right. It's not what I wanted, how I wanted to be treated. So why would I treat you or anybody else at that level of disregard?
Well, there's a balance there, isn't there? There's a balance between, imagine if you were to say, like when you guys were negotiating, rather than waiting until the week before, the 48 hours before, imagine a week or like a month before, whatever, he was saying, hey, what if we went ahead and went down to like 27.5 or whatever? You could have very well done business with him now today, but no, it's the last minute deals or the last minute flip the script, the bait and switch, or, and I believe that it's important to negotiate. When I bought my parcels of land a couple of years ago, which I'll be making more investments, over the next 24 months, is I negotiated the price down and saved $50-$60. Okay, cool. Because it was 2 cheap properties that I got just to get like, all right, this is my dirt. I could go and take a shovel and like, this is my land. Right. And it was $299 a parcel. I got 2 parcels. I said, let's do $550. Cover the deed costs and all that stuff. I say $50, but I approached it as let me go ahead and negotiate and not trying to lowball. But then again, if you were to lowball, you can always go up. But if you go too high, you can't go down. And so finding that balance and being, for example, putting yourself online, not everybody's going to be the soft-spoken investor like you are, the soft-spoken guy. Like you have like this, I could listen to you speak for an audiobook all day long, or you might have the Ben Mala types that are a little bit louder, like the stereotypical New York, that might be a little bit more in your face. And there are ultimately people for everybody. But whenever you're doing these things, understand that you might lose the appeal to certain audiences, but that's okay. And it's not about thinking about authenticity. If you're thinking about being authentic, you're being inauthentic because you're manipulating what you are or are not saying and doing. That's something people don't realize. So just putting yourself out there and starting to showcase your personality, people will begin to understand and connect with you for who you are. I mean, how many real estate guys are out there online that have these brands, but I don't even know their first names?
Yeah, they want to hide behind the brand. They don't answer the call after 5 ever.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's for a brief thing or even a quick minute, because sometimes time is of the essence. And we want to make time for our families and our hobbies and our interests and our rest. But, you don't want the next person to get that deal because finding a home might take months, right? Or finding the right parcel of land to build your future dream house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a farm. And then, when I reflect on your story, you went from Florida to Little Rock, right?
Yeah.
You're building your new foundation at the tallest building in Little Rock, right? And I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be able to help people cast their visions from one of the highest points in your state?
Man, I had a moment earlier this year, and I've spoken about this a couple occasions, not frequently though, where as Paul Povlani, he's in my network. He's a wonderful guy. He has a podcast called the Head Smack Podcast, and he believes that there are moments in everybody's career where you kind of have that like, whoa, head smack, like it was a wake up call or a realization. And I had one of those earlier this year that over the past 5 years, from the start that I had in 2018 to where I am today, that I have accomplished a lot of what I set out to accomplish, not just monetarily, but I'm talking when it comes to my personal brand and what I was working to build and create, establishing myself as a person of trust and authority, somebody who is the expert, not because I say I'm an expert, but because other people call me an expert. That's really the flex, so to speak. The edification means more than anything I could talk about, regarding myself. I don't say, oh, look how great I am. It's other people are saying that. And so when I was going and looking into where do I want to set up shop, it was a decision between going back home to Jacksonville or staying in Little Rock, which is where I've been for the past 3 years with my fiance and my animals and, establishing some roots, but I never committed to it. And Demetri, I believe that over the next decade, there will be this call for offline businesses to go online and online businesses to go offline. What I mean by that is having those local connections, even though your startup might be remote. Shaking hands with the local business and the local lawyers and the Chamber of Commerce and going out. And so I made the conscious decision that when I was looking for an office space, I wanted to have something with a view to where it doesn't matter if I feel like garbage walking in the morning. I know that, man, this is nice, and I chose that. I chose to rent the HQ in Simmons Tower, which is the tallest building in Arkansas, which it's 40 stories, which it's not gigantic, but it's the tallest building in the state. And I saw that Little Rock, from a real estate perspective and from an investment perspective, has a lot of potential that people aren't really recognizing, again, because, and coming from the PR background, the crime rate in a city will affect the property values. And Little Rock is known for being dangerous. But what people don't realize if they're not from here is most all of that crime happens below the interstate. It doesn't happen in my nice areas. My nice areas, liberal, upper class, like it's there's no crime. I could walk and have my fiance walk and I don't have to worry about anything. But if I was to go below the interstate, yeah, that would be a concern. And so seeing how I could change those perceptions long term, I'm committed to that. And I'm committed to setting roots. And it also, I'm thinking about just recent opportunities from the past couple of weeks since this announcement, then I'll shut up, is there are local businesses that I'll be able to go and do keynotes in front of, take that recording, post it online, get landed on more speaker bureaus. And so I'm using those offline connections and things that I'm doing to build my online presence. So it's really a symbiosis. And I think when working with a client and establishing that vision, you have to position yourself as a public figure. Otherwise, you're going to get drowned out in all of the noise.
Right. And you are serving people. When you go out there in an audience, and even if that person doesn't become your client, they got some value that they can bring into their business right away. And let's say that little nugget or two from that event helps them. Now they have the funds to be able to leverage and invest with you or, another qualified consultant and boost their business. So
absolutely
remember that. They might have met you like a month or two ago, and then they run into you again and say, Isaac, I put to use what you said. What else you got? Okay, come to my office. And I think you brought that up to say, you know what? It's okay to have an office instead of meeting at Starbucks or some other random location that's noisy. Or
you're creating that environment. right? Just like you create a work environment for yourself at home. But I realized too, having a home office, just because you can have a home office, like I'm not in my office space right now. I've been working from home today and had multiple calls, and I'm still setting up a quality studio. I think that when you're building out, and whether you're launching a podcast or going on as a guest or working from home, you need to have and pay attention to your environment. You don't want to just sit at the kitchen table just to record. Like, take some time to invest in your setup and your appearances. And having the ability, like I remember going into Target a couple months ago, and this was one of the biggest indicators to me that maybe I have some potential here. Maybe I should launch MCG here rather than any other question. Like, it cemented it. And I was walking into Target and got recognized. And it was by somebody who locally I've met several times, had conversations with, and I've connected with on Facebook. And he's like, Isaac. And I was like, whoa. And it was a local business owner who's also a radio host. And I got recognized in a city that I haven't even spent time investing in. So now imagine if I invest in the city and invest in my personal brand locally, and having that local connection is going to boost you online. And so whether you're in Pennsylvania, Miami, Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, or Salt Lake City, Utah, it's like, have those connections, follow up with them on social media. So you maintain this, you have what I call is the law of familiarity. I mean, when you were the new kid at school, everything felt awkward. You didn't know your teachers, you didn't know your classmates, but by the end of the school year, you knew everybody, and you went to school and you didn't care about your appearance as much as the first day of school. And having that familiarity breeds trust and breeds, credibility in it. And that is the foundation of relationships.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you talk about having a legacy of service, even way past our lives, right? Like you said, that to create a structure and an entity that goes far beyond ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Like as I sip this coffee, I'm thinking about Mr. Rogers, right? one of the heroes of my childhood, right? He's not known as Fred Rogers, right? Mm-hmm. He's not known as anything else, and he's known for a lot of things, right? A swimmer, a speaker, but he told kids that it was okay to stand up for yourself, to express yourself, right? That bad things do happen, right? And now you have an estate that licenses something to a ceramic coffee manufacturer, right? So, we're in a place where you don't know where the value can lie, right? But if you're authentic and true to yourself, someone's always going to resonate with that. And,
well,
go ahead.
No, there are so many great things that we've already talked about and so many directions we can dive into, but I recorded a video.
Feel free to.
And I had a box of tissues, and I had a Sharpie marker, and I did this video, and I said, this is a demonstration of personal branding. And every time I do a speaking event, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have somebody throw me a box of tissues, and I'm going to sign it. And I said that, this is just a box of tissues. It's worth $1, $2, whatever, $3 if it's the Kleenex brand. And that's all it is. It's worth more if you have a runny nose or need to, pick your nose or whatever. But imagine if this box of tissues was signed by Michael Jordan. You could take this box of tissues and sell it on eBay for $50,000 just because it's a signature. Because it's imagine if that coffee mug you had, which has an emotional connection to you, but imagine if it was actually signed by Mr. Rogers himself. You wouldn't be drinking out of it. You'd have it on your bookshelf. You'd have it in the office. But again, and that is the power of personal branding, to where it's thinking about introductions. When somebody introduces somebody to you or introduces you to somebody they know, it's a form of edification. And that edification is an extension of trust. You're saying that I vouch for this person. This is somebody you can trust. And that is one of the best ways for you to have a strong personal brand and find ways to be edified. And, Mr. Rogers is a legacy name. And thinking about, you mentioned Nike. You can mention Nike, but not everybody will know the founder. But you mentioned Amazon, everybody knows Jeff Bezos. You mentioned Tesla, everybody knows Elon Musk. I mean, these are simple examples, but these are truthful examples of a strong personal brand at work. Mark Zuckerberg, has went from that nerdy tech bro to he's practicing jujitsu and he's surfing and he's having billionaire yacht parties. But those are all people who have made the decision to become well known and to build something that will extend way past them. So, and you don't even have to be a business owner to have a personal brand or to grow your personal brand. You could be an entertainer, a speaker, an author, or somebody who just is passionate about talking about something that impacts you.
You're so right. And this is how I see a lot of times books getting launched. If somebody created a content channel, YouTube, a podcast, anything that some level of consistency, somewhere where people resonate with that. And people do even reach out to me on occasion. Hey, this episode, this moment, I connect with it. This story happened to someone I love.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Like, it added to my day. And you're like, wow, really? Like this kind. So now I'm like, okay, now go back and do more. Right? Like, do it again. Like the audience loves it. And again, I'm not here for the recognition, but hey, if it makes a difference, keep making that difference. Right. And now this content is evergreen, right? Someone could tune in a year, 5 years. And as long as you're not talking about the topic of the day, right? Whatever that heavy topic of the day is, right? It stays relevant, right? And when things change, you're like, oh, let's see how you evolve in your brand, how you presented yourself, right? Whether it be, okay, well, let's say in a year you're committed to fitness, right? And that year later, not only you're stronger in your fitness, now you're stronger in your confidence, your poise, you're attracting more talent, right? And let's say with you pivot into branding and you say, look, this is your superpower, right? And so now you don't want to call yourself an expert, just like we shouldn't really call ourselves smart. But when somebody else, right? If someone says, hi, I'm smart, you're like, okay, you're great.
Yeah, right.
I can't disagree with you because then I would be calling you stupid. So,
oh, well, yeah, true. Yeah,
so I'm a Philly person, right? But we grew up around New Yorkers, DC people, and one thing I wanted to ask you when it comes to personal branding or branding in general, or how we present ourselves, how much should be rigid and how much should be flexible?
In terms of what you show?
Yeah.
So I have what is called the Skyline strategy. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Dennis Yu. He's one of the greatest guys in my network. Dennis Yu has what is called the $1 a day strategy, and he's well known for that. This is something that I'm adopting. I'm taking what he's done with the $1 a day, and I'm adopting the same thing for the Skyline strategy. So when you find a city, every city has a skyline or doesn't have a skyline, right? If you're talking a small town, but Little Rock, there's a skyline. My skyscraper is in that skyline that every single person sees when they're driving by. And when you're creating content online, you're effectively building your city in the 30,000 foot view of what does your city look like? What does the skyline look like? And you don't want to showcase only business content, because if you only do that, nobody knows who you are as the person. And so a couple of days ago, I had somebody who I started talking to, and I went to his profile and he's like, man, I'm not getting any views. None of my videos have over 1,000. I go to his profile and they are all about business. They're all about virtual assistants, all about emails, all about automation, all about outsourcing. And I'm like, I have no freaking clue who you are, George. His name's not George, but for his privacy. Yeah. And I said, when was the last time you just made an introduction and said, hey, my name is George. This is what I'm about. This is who I am. And I'm like, you do that and start showing who you are, people will know about you. And so for every 2 business posts you make, something that would progress your business forward or your credibility, you do 1 post that's personal. So I might do one talking about book distribution or the impact of a signature, which would be business related, but I might make another post that's personal and says that I don't serve tea in my office. It's coffee only, which is one of the posts that I made lately. That's a personal post. Or a story about how I was flown out to VidCon by Facebook, or how, Boy Scouts impacted me, just different bits and pieces. And so when you're looking at what you should talk about and what you should include, never approach it where if you're talking about a pain point, just like I mentioned earlier with my grandparents and having that fine, that's not from a place of victimhood. It's a place of vulnerability. And that vulnerability is what connects people. But again, there's this balance you have to find between showcasing your professional life and your personal experiences, your personal stories. But those stories are what will cement to where it doesn't matter if another real estate guy comes along, but they're going to know that, hey, they can trust Demetri because he has a heart, he has ethics, he has morals, he has, these things that other real estate guys might not have. And trust me, I've worked with some real estate guys, like some of them, man, are all sunshine and rainbows on the front, but they're complete jerks behind the scenes. It's astounding. But I know that I could trust you, and I would rather work with you than the next guy.
Yeah, I feel it's like the reverse billboard effect. Like if somebody, like let's say here, there might be quite a few people on I-95 advertising that they're great, advertising their production records, advertising their volume, right? And then I've tried working with some of these people, right? I don't need to name them because maybe they're better now. But at the time, lagging customer service. It's all perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because what if I point out that someone was bad last year and now they're just like an angel, right? Then I'm pointing out somebody like I'm not.
But that is okay. But no, that is still a perception of them, which means that their personal brand needs work or their brand needs work because you are dealing with yesterday's perspectives, which that can be dangerous too, because you could think about Jordan Belfort. He has constantly been working to get out of the shadow of his past. And that is something that he will never fully escape.
Yeah, I feel like that's an idea of, well, do we believe in redemption, right? And that's more of a values thing, right? Where
Yeah.
if someone goes to jail, like I have a ex felon who shot somebody in the face living in one of my buildings, right? He was rejected from 10 places, right?
Did he threaten to shoot you in the face?
Not yet.
No? Okay.
But anyhow, again, I'm making light of things, but this person was rejected, right? They want to live near their kid. They want to have opportunities to grow, and they did pay their price to society.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, here's the deal. As long as you agree to live a good life and not make the bad choices that led to where you are, I'm all about redemption, believing that you can get better, and now you are there. And now you're paying your bills, you're a responsible human, and it's all good, right?
Absolutely.
So giving people that chance, right? And I'm not saying give people who aren't qualified chances, people who don't earn money chances. You got to earn it, okay? But you can start from day one anytime you want, right? And so as opposed to the person who comes in smooth, right? I've had the Harvard-educated attorney be a person who falls behind 4 months on their rent and 5, and then just pays with excuses and drama and tying up your day and your schedule. So those types of things aren't appealing to me, right? If someone said they went to the Ivy League, I said, and then what? And then what did you do with it, right? Where did you leverage it? How have you were impactful? What do you do to serve the community other than just serve yourself, right? And the same thing with like books, right? I'm writing books now, and I'm for myself and actually for a few others, right? And as you mentioned, most people pursue the vanity of it, of look, I'm on the bestseller list. Look, I'm on Times Square. It doesn't mean anything. Times Square.
And half the time, they're not even in the actual bestseller category. They're in some niche category on Amazon, and they're saying that there's some Amazon bestseller. No, you're a bestseller in this category. Ethics, they miss that.
No, it's an ego boost that's fake, right? It's an adrenaline rush that just pushes someone to the top, but then they sink right down, right? And what you want is a steady burn. You want to be that book that say, okay, if my book, when it gets published, will be on the shelf in 5 years and you still could read it, right? It's not like, that's not relevant anymore, or that's passé, or that's been written to death, right? It's having something catchy, short, and so I'll just give you a preview of another book that I'm in the midst of writing, just the title. And then I want you to, and then I'll reflect on what the story is about. But just if I tell you these 2 words, tell me what comes to mind. Hugging thorns.
I would respond with another 2 words, embracing pain.
Ooh, perfect. Yes. Yeah, it's exactly the point. It's embracing pain and the challenges that come in for us and how and then sometimes when to let go of some of these pains. Yeah. Right? Like if you're loving the wrong person, if you're committed to the wrong cause, if you're climbing the wrong mountain, right? I mean, you're building your own mountain from a little rock, right? A place where other people are running from or have preconceived notions of something that doesn't exist. But the largest retailer in the world is based in your town, okay? Yeah. Nearby in Bentonville, right? And see, there you go. See, that's the difference. Some people.
Well, I mean, think about luxury. Dillard's is a luxury business. Like you go into Dillard's, you're going to be paying more. You're going to basically be paying a markup no matter what you buy in Dillard's. You're never getting a deal. And it's like Dillard's HQ is literally right down the road from me, right? And so again, those perceptions and those different things and writing a book, man. I mean, if we could talk about this for a minute, I mean, I think about how many realtors have lead magnets. And a lot of these times, like I remember I had one realtor and she's like, Isaac, I want to do a lead magnet. It's going to be like 50 pages and I just want to publish it as an ebook. And I'm like, You're wasting time. You might as well publish it as an actual physical book that you can hand out. Like if you're going to be taking the time to do this, you might as well go all the way and launch something again that could be on the bookshelves. Or even if, there are two kinds of books that you can write that are nonfiction. You could write the kind of book that is only going to exist for where the market is currently or what is around currently. So think about social media based books talking about Instagram or Facebook or MySpace. Those books are obsolete based off of the evolution of these platforms versus let me write about a more generalized subject matter that can still apply no matter what marketing channel it is. So talking about human psychology, for example, it's a book on human psychology in terms of sales and marketing would exist much longer and be more applicable than the book that's only talking about Instagram strategies. So, I mean, thinking about, again, is this going to be obsolete in a year from now, or is this going to last forever? And that's, the intention that I set when I was writing my own book. And when I'm working on the second edition, it's like, I want to talk about philosophies. I want to talk about things that will exist, not just something that will be gone tomorrow.
Timeless. The last few years, for instance, Stoic philosophy has been kind of a bedrock for me. Is having full emotional control regardless of the situation. Right? Because it's so easy to say, oh, look, what's happening there and what's happening there and what happened to someone else and feel a sense of panic, right? But if we're believers, we're literally supposed to be told, give that worry to God, right? And it took me a long time to kind of hand it off and say, all right, here, this is yours. I know it's still something I got to deal with, still something I got to work through, but it's not going to bother me, right? And so that takes a lot of work. And if you're not there where you feel like, oh, God, that sounds so easy, it took decades to get to that place for me. It might take less time for someone else. And however we get there, we do, because the journey is long, right? And, talk about how people have reinvented themselves even later in their career, like a Colonel Sanders, right? At the time when people retire, he's a spring chicken, right? Setting up buckets around the world. And again, it's not the healthiest product. I don't eat it, but still it's a great story, right? And so
Popeyes is better in my opinion.
I like making my own chicken, right? I like taking like the panko crumbs, right? So take like an old school cast iron pan that you might find at a flea market, right? Make sure it's coated in oil and well seasoned. And then having your different bowls with your egg wash, your flour, and your panko. And those nuggets, those are the best nuggets of all. Because I can't eat.
That's how you sell houses, man. You just have a chicken fry and invite everybody out and all 100% occupancy rate, baby. You're set.
People together. It really does. When you have an open house and you're offering even cold water on a hot summer day, right? As opposed to sign this, or the seller wants me to tell you to sign this because that's what they taught us in script class.
Yeah,
it just doesn't ring right. It's, look, if you like, sign in. I'll contact you later to see if this house is for you. Well, that's that's the truth, right? And if they don't want to write, have a nice day. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead, walk through, ask a question, don't, and go. All good.
There's the common courtesy, just like you have guests over at your house. At your personal house, hey, do you need something to drink or do you need like a bite to eat? Like that's big in the South or anywhere like Midwest. It's like if you come in somebody's house, like my fiance's grandmother, for example, every time we go over, you hungry, you need something. And it's like, you need to basically be treating all these people like your grandchildren in terms of, customer service and customer appreciation. It's like, give them the grandma experience. Seriously,
I'm all about that. Look, my background being Greek, like if you come to my house and I don't offer you something, like my mom should slap me, right?
You have the most Greek name out of anybody I've ever met, by the way.
Well, I think there's people who are more Greek, like the Papadopouloses and all these, like the road. Yeah. At least mine keep fit on like a standard, like like an SAT. I think they only have like 8 boxes for the last name, so I got 7.
There we go.
So to go by Demetri, the real name is Demetrios, right? The martyr of the 4th century from Thessaloniki, not the Russian sounding Dimitri, right? And there's so many different versions of it, but then there's only 7 spots in a license plate. So one night I was inspired. I said, you know what? I want people to, when they see my little Lexus hybrid, they want to know that it's me. Right. And one day I'll put the full screen on there and make it look nice. But the word Demetri is on my license plate. The
There we
no
go.
ones, right? Just all letters, right? How did nobody else claim it? Because maybe somebody else thought it was already taken. But if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's actually a really good lesson. I recently had the opportunity of meeting face to face with somebody who I've been connected with for years now, Giancarlo Bernini, and he's a magician. And he was stopping in Little Rock for a layover to get back home. And we ended up meeting and we did an entire vlog together. It's up on my YouTube channel. And he was on Penn and Teller's Fool Us. The Penn and Teller are some huge magicians in Vegas, and they've had a career spanning decades. And he was on one time. He didn't fool them because the entire show's premise is see if you can fool some of the greatest magicians that are in our era. And the second time that he applied, he didn't hear anything back. And then there was a third time that he was talking to his mentor, and he's like, should I do this again? And he's like, yeah, take the same email and just send it again. So he literally took 3 seconds to resend the email he sent the year before. And he landed on the show and he fooled Penn and Teller. So it's like those small things of just like thinking that, oh, maybe this license plate is already taken. It's like, why don't you try it and see if it is? And if it's not, now you have a cool kick-ass, license plate. And again, we have all of these decisions and micro decisions on a daily basis of like, this self-doubt of, again, why would I be the one creating content when I might not be the number one expert or I might not be there yet? But people want to follow you for where you're going and the vision that you're setting. So I have a lot of the same people following me today that were following me 5 years ago, and they trusted me and trusted my vision that I was working towards something great. And that is a privilege. That is an honor. That is a gift. And understanding that people follow you for you, not just what you can do for them, man, that's a huge psychological shift.
It is. And psychologically, it validates what you do, right? Mm-hmm. That the commitment, the sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the investments, the pushing through, and the persistence when it didn't make sense, when you had maybe a month or two that wasn't even profitable, right? When you're questioning why you do this, and then all of a sudden you hit this breakthrough. Mm-hmm. Right? A success story, another success story, right? And it's like, ooh, I'm catching fire. You got to hold that fire for those low moments, because they do come again, right? Life is seasonal, and you make these strong impacts. So that I feel like that's emboldening for all of us to carry that when sometimes we, like you said, you might make a few calls, you might have a few meetings, they don't go well. That's okay. That's mm-hmm. not for you. Right? Either sharpen up your communication, your offer, or reach out to new people. And like you said, the same message, right? As opposed to, oh, I got to change the message. They didn't like ABC, so I should say XYZ. They're like, no. What do they say? Business is about saying old things to new people, right?
Well, that has been the biggest shift in my mindset over the past year, because there came a point where I felt like that redundancy, like I couldn't be redundant. I had to come up with something new every single time. So it's funny because our conversation together, we're talking about some stuff that's new, but I've also mentioned the same exact things that I've talked to you about on 25 other podcasts, right? So the reason I'm doing that is because it's true, because it's honest, because it's, how it actually is. And again, it's saying the same thing to new people, because the people that might be listening to one podcast aren't necessarily going to listen to the other podcasts. And so I might be on one show talking about franchising. I'll be on another show talking about outsourcing. I'll be on another show talking about real estate, such as your own, but there might not be overlap between those audiences. And that expands your distribution. And eventually you can go into the broader base. Yeah. As you grow, as your expertise and experience gains and evolves. Yeah. So does your message. What I'm talking about now isn't the same that I was talking about 5 years ago, though. Like it went from having one business or talking about how I got involved with MLM to now, no, I'm building my own company, and this is what we're about, and all of those great details. And that story gives people a timeline. This is the first time in history where every single thing we're doing is documented. We started to see that earlier in the 20th century, but not to this degree to where historians, as long as there's not some sun flare that wipes out, everything, 1,000 years from now, they'll be able to look back on this conversation and study Demetri. They'll be able to study Isaac. They'll be able to study these people or craft an artificial intelligence that is now controlling the world off of this conversation, although I think AI is a great thing at the end of the day, but that right there, it's all of those little things and not being afraid of saying the same thing over and over.
Right, because I feel like even if we do repeat ourselves, there might be just that moment of clarity, somewhere in a conversation where the light bulbs go on,
Absolutely.
where someone's like, "Wait, I'm hearing this," but like just like a person when they chisel that greatness, right? And I've been to Italy where you see like Michelangelo's David, right?
Mm,
Somebody had this vision to say, "Oh, this block of marble that's just sitting in a field, gathering rain and dust, needs to become this beautiful piece of art," right? And for him to become that expert, it wasn't just an imagination, it wasn't just expertise. He literally had to find cadavers,
mm.
found dead people, right? Who didn't have families, who didn't have money, who would just be buried in potter fields. And he'd go there in the middle of the night. This is criminal activity. Okay.
I
This is
didn't
not
know this.
tolerated today at all. Please don't do this.
Hmm.
If you want to be a sculptor. But he would sit there and dissect the bodies and go into the muscle fibers. So when you see David and you see this movement, and you see these muscle fibers,
Mm.
he went into it. He, again, couldn't go molecular, but he went into the sinews of the fibers of everything. So when you chisel that greatness, you're like, oh, I felt it. I saw it. Like you talked about the sensory experience, the common questions, the who, what, where, when, and why, right? That's all of it, right? And again, that's really deep. Could we just see the art and say, oh, it's pretty? You're like, but if you went
Yeah.
behind the surface to say, hey, what did it take to carve that? What did it take for an old man near 80 to be on his back painting the Sistine Chapel so that 500 years later, people can take selfies by it?
Absolutely. And Bob Proctor, I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Proctor, one of the
I've met him.
man, one of
I love his work.
one of the one of the greatest men to walk this earth, in my opinion. He talked about how the painting exists in the mind of the artist first, before it's ever on canvas. And I know that, for example, I believe it is the statue of David, to where there's a specific muscle that only shows when your pinky's moved. And I believe that with the statue of David, his pinky is in like a certain position to where his muscle is only that specific muscle that is connected to the pinky is showing. And that is an attention to detail that today, when you're doing a business and building a business, I've been overly critical of clients in the past, and I will be overly critical of clients in the future and the present of, if you have a period, let's say you're using your middle name and doing a period, it should not be a, it should be a period, and that should be the same thing on every single platform. Doesn't matter what it is, there should not be this space. This space should be here. This grammar or this comma should be here. And it's not that you have to be perfect, that's impossible, but you're maintaining those little things that are adding up to the bigger results. And I'm huge about that when you're building out your personal brand, to where, like, take the time to spell check your captions, take the time to make sure your captions are proper. I saw a video today and the video was wonderful, but there was a misspelling of one of the guy's names. And I'm like, that's just a small detail that would have taken you 10 seconds to do. That would now eliminate any keyboard warrior going into your comment section and being like, you misspelled this, right? And, I'm not saying that you do these things for the keyboard warriors of the internet, but having that respect and appreciation is the same thing as if you're walking down the street and you see a piece of trash. Are you staring at that piece of trash, or are you picking it up?
Oh, I pick it up. I mean, again, this being in some of these networks where others inspire you, and you're informing others that not only is this not tolerable, I'm taking time out of my day to pick this up.
Yep.
Right? Like, okay, now you can do it too. Now, usually when the trash is wet, I won't pick it up, but if it's dry, I will. Because sometimes you're in the city, you might have to walk a block or two before you find a trash can, or you may end up
That is true.
your car and throwing it out somewhere else. And so you're like, well, why am I doing this? And you're like, because the earth needs to be clean. Because, trash begets trash. Positivity attracts positivity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if somebody else, let's say the bathroom is a little bit of a mess. Well, I wipe it up, right? Well, I'm not the janitor, but that next person has a better experience and maybe a better day.
Again, ego.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. Okay. And that being said, can we be a solutions-based society, right? Because in essence, we're a community, right? If we didn't have things like bills and dollars, we would just sit there and be friendly all day, right? We'd be like ancient civilizations where we just worry about fire and write stories, but we have to pay our bills. So we have to take on these personas, right? And sometimes for others, that's a new identity, right? But you should never neglect the self. You shouldn't just chase an identity to say, well, this is the identity I need to pursue in order to make money, to survive and grow and be seen a certain way. Okay, what embodies you? What's in your heart? All right, what, like take a moment. It might take years, and I'm still discovering it, because I feel like we all have this beautiful untapped potential in us, right? And you're helping others bring out their potential, right? As opposed to being a sole proprietor, right? Because you could be a sole proprietor selling any service you want, but when you retire, there's no business to sell.
Yeah.
You create a brand, you have some structure, some marketing, right? Like you talked about, MLM is network marketing, right? You build a network, you're marketing it, but it's for someone else.
Yeah.
And the moment there's some integrity issue, some change in payouts or structure, you see it going on. You got thousands of people kind of scratching their heads. What do I do next? Where do I run now? And it's not running out of like with fire and enthusiasm, it's desperation. So you take your skill set and you're helping others build their network and market their brands. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're deleting the skill set that you've acquired. You're taking the best of what you've done there and bring it to a new ballpark.
Absolutely. And there are bits and pieces of every single business that you get involved with that you're able to take and apply. So for example, team building or understanding recruitment or understanding maybe a compensation structure. So Mashman Consulting Group, we're going to have 500 consultants working for us over the next decade, but that doesn't mean that there are going to be incentives for recruiting new consultants, but they will have a pay structure and a change in commission based off of the rank in the company. And it's not that the rank will be influenced by recruitment. The rank is influenced based off of qualifications, but I still took some of that inspiration from network marketing. And when I was in the music industry and understanding how you can get in front of more people or host events or how you could sell tickets or canvas an area, it's the same exact philosophy which I'm using to now do events or to get, just like, for example, how we came about and had this conversation. It wasn't some complicated post or some 25-hour interview process for this. It was letting my personal brand speak for itself and using the skill sets that I've developed before to have a killer introduction and say, hey, Demetri, and I sent you a voice message. These are all skills that you learn and you acquire. Just like, my grandfather had so many, he was a carpenter. He built cabinets for a living, and he had a shop with hundreds of tools, thousands of tools. Did he use all of those tools every day? No. He used some of the tools every single week and some tools only on special occasions. And that's a lot like building your business. You're using certain things every single day, from social media marketing to relationships to connecting to, public speaking abilities and understanding tonalities and inflections. But there are other things that you might not use, such as you might not write an article every day, but you'll do it every week or every month, or you might not be on an interview every week or every month. So there are all these different assets that build up your value proposition when you're approaching somebody else. And, speakers don't come out of the gate making $50,000 and realtors don't come out of the gate selling the mansions. There are levels to this, in the old lingo. And that's not something that you should have less appreciation for, but more.
No, clearly. And very well said. I mean, I completely agree. I don't think I can even add much to that except to ask, when we're trying to duplicate ourselves and grow our teams, like you said, you have this ambition to serve more clients, and to do that, you need a large team. When you recruit people, what's at least one question or a reflection that you ask somebody, to see if they're a good fit for your team?
I want them to have personal ambition. And if a person has ambition that they align with your own success, you have somebody who will not leave you and somebody who will grow with you. And this is actually taken from Niccolo Machiavelli, from The Prince. And people oftentimes hate on The Prince, but if you take it from a 30,000 foot overview and actually break down what he's talking about, you realize that he's not telling you to manipulate people and that the prince isn't about some, do things unethically. He actually talks down on that and mentions in multiple chapters and places about how this is not a recipe for success, and that there were some princes who were so vicious and ruthless that their success was short-lived. And one of the greatest things that he mentions in the chapter is that if you were to find a person who has ambition and does not align themselves with your success, you do not want to keep them around you, because they'll do anything to get a leg up. And that means stepping on your toes or getting in front of you, versus the person who aligns themselves with your own success. So your success is their own. That is one of the best pieces of team building from a unbiased standpoint. That if I'm hiring a consultant and saying, you're going to go out of your way to close deals, we're giving you the tools, we're giving you the training, we're giving you the credibility, we're giving you all of that, the stamp of approval, but we want to make sure that you're going out and you're hungry yourself. If they're making $100,000, I know that the company's making money. I know that they're making money. I know I'm making money. I know that they're going and they're scaling, and then they can grow out their personal brands, and it's a win-win situation. So look for the people who have individual ambition that align that ambition with your company.
Yeah, their vision, your vision has to be so grand that their wildest vision fits within it. And if you're creating that beautiful blueprint for success that took you a long time, they could just walk in and say, all right, here's what you do. You do the work, you train you, and then you can also add your creative spin and vision and point out things that I might not see, right? Because you're going to have things that you're good at, but that you're not great at. And they might be great at something that you don't like to do at all. So you find these different, traits, attributes, and you combine them together. And, just like you mentioned, people like Gary Vee from events like VidCon, I would love to ask you about VidCon. He asks people every quarter, like, hey, is this the seat on the bus you'd like to have? As opposed to, I need you to keep doing what you're doing. So what was it like to be at these types of experiences? Because for me, it's like a lot. It's like you take it in like a fire hose. You're like, oh my gosh, look at all the videos they're doing. Look at all this thing and that thing. And do you distill it into, here's some good insights to take to my work, or here's some people to collaborate with? Like, what's your game plan when you attend events like that?
I'm always observing human behavior. And so if I was to not choose marketing or business or anything, I would choose to probably go into psychology because I'm deeply interested in it. And getting flown out to VidCon, for example, my flight was paid for. I've been flown out to Washington, D.C. I've been flown out to Los Angeles. I'm getting flown out to Denver, Colorado later this year for an event. And, I've worked my way to get to that point. But back then, it was always observing these creators in a natural environment. And what I noticed is that creators would be out and about and actively seeking opportunities for content. They wouldn't wait for the content. They would find opportunities or find good backdrops or things that would look good. And I adopted that mindset, which I call now the mindset of the creator, to where you don't have to be in a studio to record a video. You could be out and about and in a city or on the beach and record a video and do a training. And having those different variations and those backdrops diversifies your content. It makes it seem like you're more than just a talking head. I mean, if you're having the same backdrop for every single video you're in, you look like a talking head versus somebody who's worth listening to, worth talking about. And so it took me a while to feel like I fit in too, because, and it wasn't even an imposter syndrome, but it was, these people are living in Los Angeles and doing these things, and they're getting paid more than me, or they've been doing this for a certain period of time. But I just soaked everything up. And what I would do is I would approach these larger creators that people would be following for years, and I would approach them as their equal. And this is essential for business and getting into rooms that you want to be in. You should never approach somebody as if they're a god. It's like if you're pitching somebody on LinkedIn, like, for example, I was a high schooler and I pitched like Patrick Bet David to connect with him in my network. And I was like, hey, I'd love to connect with you. He's been in my network for years. Or Brad Lee on Facebook. I'm not going and sending these people and being like, I'm your biggest fan. Like, that's not what I'm doing. And if you do that, man, you lose all of your power, all of your leverage, all of your respect, versus approaching these relationships as equals. Even if your success is not equal to theirs, you're approaching them as somebody who is working to be their equal. And so it's a place of respect versus a place of, like, being, as Eminem would coin, the stan, right? There's so many stands for business gurus, but that's not how you get deals. It's like if you were to have somebody who wants to buy a property and be like, man, I love what you got going on. I would love to purchase from you, and and they're excited. You'd be like, oh, all right, that might be too much, versus, hey man, I've seen what you're doing. I love it. I'd love to be in your network, or I'd love to maybe do business with you, and those are just some of the lessons, man. Those experiences were some of the best, and I'm looking forward to making more of them too. I don't want the best times to be behind me. I want more of those.
With that perspective, it's all about, then people will be interested in what's coming next, right? what comes next. Because that's something I had to encounter a lot is imposter syndrome, walking into
Mhm.
rooms where you're not as accomplished, where you're not as financially well heeled, where it took a gigantic investment to get into that room and you're scared. Then you meet that person. It's not like there's marbles in your mouth, but you feel like you need to make a good impression. So you might talk too much, right? So one of the Greek sayings that I learned, like fewer words and better, right?
Mm.
So just a few words, like you said, hey, I noticed this, love your work, great job. Hey, by the way, here's a quick idea if you're open to hearing about it.
Even more importantly, not few words, but what words are spoken. So a couple years ago, my first ever business trip was in network marketing, and it was to go up to Minnesota it was Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I took a bootleg, and I've told the story several times, but I went from Jacksonville, Florida on this bootleg Chinese bus. It wasn't even Greyhound. It was a ticket from Jacksonville, Florida up to New York City. It was a Chinese, I think it was called Starline. It was like $80. I waited in New York City for 4 hours, got picked up by my downline. We drove out to Chicago and then to Minneapolis and picking up team members along the way. And the vice president of the company, Alex Morton, he's somebody who I still have a tremendous amount of respect for and listen to and view as a mentor. And there were other young kids, and I was the best dressed person aside from Alex and my other mentors. I was in a suit, I had a tie, I was in dress shoes, and it was a $200 suit that my mom bought me for prom. And I wore that to this event. And I was asking him about advice and business and telling my story, and other kids were asking to take a picture with his Rolex. Not how many words, but what words you're saying.
Oh, completely. I mean, I went to one of these expensive networking events. One weekend cost just as much as my car, if not a little more. And with a $20 suit from the thrift store,
Yeah.
right? And a $15,000 Rolex watch, right? Which I bought and then afterwards I sold because it felt like an albatross. And there's two or three people. Oh wow! Look, I have the same watch, and they're like, "All right, so will this lead to friendship?" No.
Yeah. If anything, it's going to make me feel rough because now I have the same thing you have, and it's like I want some uniqueness. Like the watch that I have on my wrist is a couple $100 Christmas gift from my fiance that's worth more than a Rolex. Now I love Rolexes, but you know, still I'd rather have this watch that's impactful than the one that everybody else buys to compensate for small size.
It's the impact, and like I'm thinking like that small size thing goes along with houses, cars, etc. Whatever it is that you accumulate and have a need to show up, not to show off this to say, hey, you could do this too. Because if you say that, then you're actually inspiring and moving people, right?
Absolutely, different intentions.
Oh yeah, like let's say one of my mentors, Andy Frisella, when he was
Same.
a kid, yeah, he's a kid, and his dad, Big Jim, who I had the pleasure of talking to for a while at one of these events, you see a Lamborghini
At the gas station.
Yeah, you know the story. He's like, I want that. He's like, all right, son, you can have that. It's just going to take a lot of work
for it.
But meaning it can be done, as opposed to, oh well, that guy's a jerk and he probably screwed someone to get that money, right? So if you have that parent, now that really affects you. Like you'd have to undo a lot of bad wiring to get into that good.
Damn, man, you want to talk about a strong personal brand? I mean, you mentioned his name, and I immediately knew what story you're talking about. That is a strong personal brand. Not only to know the same person, but to know the same story out of all of the episodes or out of hundreds of hours of content, to pinpoint a story from another person's life. That is fascinating.
Well, it's the right, it's like the right type of name dropping, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I met them once; they're my best friend." That's wrong. That's wrong. I have respect. I met him. I like him. Admire him. See what he does. Study the podcast. Real AF is not just his initials, but who he is, right? And this idea of being who you are, it will repel people, but it will also attract people so that they will be stronger fans, as opposed to.
Demetri, are you a hoe?
I ain't no hoe. I share the show. Right? You're sharing the show.
Damn.
Right? Is
that's great.
Right? No, you benefited from someone. Share that with someone. Right?
Yep.
We get this valuable knowledge, and you're guarding it like it's some mystical secret. Right? But if I, like Bob Proctor, when I met him in breakfast many years ago at the Bellagio, he's finishing up his breakfast. I go see him. I walk up to him. I said, "Are you Dr. Bob Proctor?" Yes, I am. All right, I got a yes.
Man, I'm envious of you for that. I'm not
I
envious
got,
of many, but
1 degree separation. I got that yes, right? Love your work. All I said is love your work. I said, would you have a quick moment to say hi to my friends? Sure. He walks over, get a picture, shake hands, have a nice day. That's it.
yeah,
And the next day, I see him along. I don't talk to him. Let him go bless other people. Right? The guy was in
yeah.
his 80s and had another year or two left of life. Okay. So when you're that in that fourth quarter of life, like you said, being recognized for who you are and your greatness and just taking a quick moment to be there. If you're not there in that moment, if you're him in your fourth quarter and you're bitter and you're boring and you had a bad
Yeah.
day and then you're not there for someone, guess what that does? It mars your legacy, right? It's like, oh, well, here's what the book was, but it wasn't congruent with the private person.
Well, you have and we're talking about the disparity between the online persona and the real life person. And that's something where I'm actively thinking about as if I'm doing this online, then I need to make sure I'm this person offline as well, 100% of the time. And I'll be willing to admit shortcomings or be willing to talk about those vulnerabilities or those things that I'm working on. Like, I'm never going to tell you that, like, I'm the guy who's like, I had somebody ask me about my routine a couple months ago, or not even a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago. And he's like, so what's your routine like? And I'm like, well, right now my routine sucks. I'm not going to lie to you and say that, oh, my routine is 100% set in stone, because it's not. So it's like, I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. Now, I told him next year when I'm back on the show, then that might be something entirely different. It probably will be. So having that honesty too, and that honesty goes a long way, especially in this age of confusion and lies and what's real and what's fake and misinformation, disinformation, whatever the difference is. You know, it's like that. And again, it's not about being authentic. It's just about being you.
Right. And having that same story that can be applied, doesn't have to be like, I don't have to sit there and say, okay, I have 10 stories. I tell it to 10 different people. So I got to pull up that story or else I'm not congruent. Right. So that
Mm-hmm.
adds a stress, that adds an authenticity factor. And then you're not really believed because people are, they, like you said about psychology, about being able to see right through people. Right. To say, hey, what are your real motives here? Is it of service or is it to get more facts, figures, etc., more accolades, more ribbons, more bows? Like, you don't need that, right? At the end of the day, like, vanity's ego, and it doesn't go into the casket, right? What
Well,
goes
you can
there?
have that.
Passion.
I would say that you can have that, but you need to balance it with service. And that's an aspect that takes time to get to, because especially if you're starting out and you're struggling, how can you balance the idea of I'm helping other people when I can't pay my bills? And that's painful. And that's a confusing situation to be in.
I've been there.
Yeah, we all have.
I just know that it's going to get better one day, right? I know that I won't quit, and that my story will inspire others who have nearly lost it all, and then somehow get it back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be a devastating divorce, yes. Whether it be near foreclosure, yes. Whatever that is, that you're like, all right, this hurt, I'm injured, but I will get back and be better for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then anyone else who's gone through this says, you know what, I could stay down or I could be inspired by this story. So your story inspires. I think it's moving. I look forward to next year's version of you because I know it will be better in some way. Does it have to be better in all the ways? No. But one thing I love to tell people if I haven't seen them for a while, I'll just say one thing. Hey, real quick, what's going on? I just want to tell you something. Oh, what is it? I noticed the growth.
Mm.
That's it. Just noticing the growth, not kissing their ass, not trying to curry favor or anything, but just acknowledging that whatever work they've done on themselves, it shines through. That's it. And if they get a
Yeah.
smile and you walk off, that's it. Now you left a
Mm-hmm.
positive impression on someone. And if I go see them again, do you think they want to talk to you? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
You know, first form, right? I went to that building. The place is immaculate. It's clean. The
Mm-hmm.
highest standards of everything. Then you go to S2. I went there once, and then a few days later, they remembered my name.
Mm.
And I'm like, do you remember everybody's name? Like, no, just the people who really stand out. I'm like, am I that weird? Like, no, you were just that present. Right. So
Fascinating.
that's the memorable aspect of whether it be me, you, or whatever we do. Right. Because, like I said, your name biblically, like the son of Abraham that was nearly killed as a sacrifice to God, right?
Yeah.
And that was a test to Abraham. It says, well, do you love me or do you love your son? Because you
Hmm.
see a lot of people who say, I love my kids. I, of course, love your kids, but you love them more than God.
Yeah.
What? Right? So that test, as harsh as it was, proved a point and a greater lesson to a lot of people. If that's within your belief structure, it's mine. A lot of time my faith has been on like thin ice, if not like non-existent. But
Hmm.
when you start believing, when you start getting a routine, like you talk about routines, a routine of prayer, a routine of meditation, a routine of something that's committed to your good,
Hmm.
it will improve you, and it will fill in those weak points that we all get, that we all fall back to. Like when you talk about working out, I have a gym membership for years. I just paid for it and didn't go. I would go a handful of times a year. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to go at least 3 times a week, if not six.
Isn't that the business model of gyms though? They sell based off of doubt. You know,
Well, they
eh,
sell an image of a greater you that doesn't quite exist, that you have to
but they
change.
don't address the actual problem, which is the mental side of things is more important than the physical. And no gym ever talks like that.
Well, not just that. I mean, let's just say if you really want to offer that extra step, as opposed to just because there's personal training and all that, but people have to be committed to that extra expense, showing up, doing the work, and continuing it. But let's say, you're in the gym. Who's going to go out of their way to say your form's not good? Would you have a moment for me to improve your form? We're so sensitive. I would love feedback. If you gave me feedback, you could be my friend.
Man, absolutely. I'll ask you to spot me. Yeah, like 100%. Yeah. And I think that speaks culturally, though, to where we're at. And, the pendulum swings back and forth. And I think we're entering into this stage to where, no, we need constructive criticism. We need honest truths. We need things. And this is also applicable to clients because you don't want to, you number one, a client's like, if you have somebody, a tenant who's wanting to rent from you and it's like, they're not qualified, you need to be honest with them versus the maybe, I don't know. And then you're wasting their time and then they're wasting your time. And that honesty goes a long way. And the willingness to offer that criticism from a good place and accepting criticism. But again, asking, part of being a good leader is asking for feedback and asking for advice and asking for tips or asking for expertise. And that doesn't mean you're a weak leader. That means you're a good leader that's wanting to grow. And so myself, particularly, it's like, if there are things like at the end of a consultation, be like, how do you feel about this consultation? What could have been better about this? Or what do you feel like that, have you gotten your money's worth? Asking those reaffirming questions and taking that feedback and seeing what you could do to improve upon it is what you can do to, again, have that legacy brand that can be structurally sound and exist 100 years from now.
Well, one thing for sure is that our episode today has been timeless.
I enjoyed it.
We've never had a conversation before other than just a few Facebook messages, but I follow your brand, I follow your YouTube, and I got to know you through that. Right.
Yes.
So now this is like a warmer conversation as opposed to it's cold and let's hope for better and let's kind of stumble our way into something, right? Where it feels more natural. And the fact that we're
Yep.
both equipped in some regard, where, I'm still a student, right? I'm still learning, but the idea of relatability and how I develop my brand, I respect even more the branding experts who, go through the minutia of what it takes to develop this so that it's known, so that you can connect the person to the product or service and it gels, right? Where there's no confusion that this person is not this. So, a lot of times people, whatever the climate is, whether it's politics, societal things, how much would you tell somebody to speak their opinion on their socials, and how much would you tell someone, hey, just keep it to yourself?
That we're in an election year. I've been asked that question on at least 3 or 4 podcasts in the past month. It's a good question. It's a challenging question as well. There aren't many questions that are like, wow, like, okay, let me think and be really meticulous about my delivery here. But this is one of those. If you were to ask Isaac 3, 4 years ago, I would say completely avoid politics and religion because they're divisive and they would divide your audience. Isaac in 2024 is not going to say that. I would say that you need to showcase it, but ask yourself, what is the purpose of this? So there was recently regarding the Trump assassination attempt, there are a lot of people who said some really heinous things that for being so peaceful, were not peaceful. Right. And I made a post and I said that if you believe that that bullet should have hit him, that is treason. And I basically said that you should be arrested for treason. I said that publicly on Facebook. And I had one person who said, I guess I'm in that boat. And he was a prospect who I sent a proposal to his business partner to work with as a client.
Yeah.
And I said, let's just call him Jack. I said, Jack, yes, you absolutely are. And I would like to formally retract my offer for Mashman Consulting Group to work with you. That comment and that response got more engagement than the post itself almost. And that was a statement of beliefs to where now every single person who sees that post is going to have more respect for me, be more willing to work with me. But I'm not just saying things to be divisive. I'm saying things to make an exclamation of beliefs and to have a striking conversation, because I do not want you to agree with me. But if you approach it and you ask me, well, why do you believe this? Or let's have a conversation. There's plenty of people to where, I've been able to have a stronger relationship with because we do not agree. And that is how it should be. Healthy discourse. Same with religion. It's like running away from that from a standpoint. It's like understanding that religion is not division, right? Just our conversation here, it's not meant for division. It's meant for common ground. But every single thing that I'm telling you, Demetri, is what is the intention of making this post and talking about this subject that might be challenging or might be difficult?
No, you're right. I mean, like it, with the assassination attempt, it's a human issue.
Mm-hmm.
People believe they'll go right back and default to politics because, like I said, we have a divisive media and political establishment, and a lot of people have been propagandized and brainwashed into their echo chambers. So, when someone is actually open to having some type of conversation where names aren't called, when you're the calmer side, calmer heads prevail. And when I went, it's the peel behind the cover. I went to Trump's rally in Philadelphia, Temple University, the one before the Butler event. And it was quite a diverse crowd. And the New York Times was outside, right? And they interviewed me, right? I had to go find the interview, but they asked me certain questions. They're like, well, this person is a threat to democracy and this and that. And I'm like, so instead of arguing, I deconstruct the argument. I say, well, look, I'm Greek. So democracy, it really hasn't ever flourished anywhere. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. There's no minority rights there. It's a majority rules, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about the power. It's all about getting to that ideal that you find ideal. That may not.
You're talking about where democracy started and originated,
Yeah.
right there.
Well, it's hard to. So again, it's hard to challenge that. Go ahead and challenge it, but then you can have a wrong assertion. And the idea of what they call retribution, if somebody wins, it's not retribution. It's enforcing laws that may have not been enforced before, right? And that doesn't even speak to a political side. But I feel like we're not at that point now. We're at this: who's good and who's evil, right? And if someone's evil, they're not for you.
But almost all of these things are based emotionally and not off of logic. And again, that's the same thing with building out your personal brand and offering strategic value versus emotional value. There's a balance to both, because without emotions, you wouldn't have, I feel like emotions do have a place in the political spectrum, like they do, because you have to be passionate about the things you believe in. So you are willing to fight for them, but you also have to be willing to accept that maybe you need to tone it down or take a step back and have a logical conversation versus an emotionally fueled one. Let the emotions fuel the passion, but let the logic fuel the outcomes. I think that is the way that we should, operate, and not be so charged up to where you say something, you're automatically, getting called the opposite. I mean, we could talk about democracy and how there wasn't even a Democratic vote on the Democrat nominee. Like, come on, let's just be logical here. And that's logic. That's not emotion.
It was a coronation, and if you think about the last few years, the French Revolution happened for a lot less in terms of people who are out of touch. Right. And we don't want to talk about that. But there were people in their 20s in the late 1700s who were willing to risk everything, their reputation, their future, and everything. Just over, I think it was 3% taxed. And now we're at much higher than that. Right.
Yeah. Right.
This idea of, hey, how much can you tolerate before you say no? Right. What is your boundary?
Well, it goes back to the negotiation earlier today, right? That we talked about.
No, you did great. I mean, I wouldn't want to work with someone like that either. In the past, I just mentioned that I believe in conservative values, and I lost clients. Again, just that's it. Like, there's no left, right. You could be a conservative Democrat for all I care. It doesn't matter anything to me, right? Those George Washington said, don't have parties, right? Eliminate them. Vote the person based on their integrity of their character, as Dr. King said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the color of their skin, not the background, not checking these boxes. Because guess what? I don't check any boxes. I defy labels. I hope you do too, right? Like, you're an individual, right? You don't
check the salt and pepper, curly hair, Greek god box.
Well, you said it. I didn't say it, because if I said it, I would be a narcissist. But if you say it, then it's a compliment. See?
I want your hummus recipe.
Well, we have full recipe books. I got baklava. I mean, one time I went to a boot camp hosted by Ben Newman, and I asked him what's his favorite dessert. He said baklava. And I texted Mom right away. I said, Mom, can you make some baklava? She's like, for who? I said, Ben Newman. He's like, well, who's Ben Newman? I say, he lost his mom at 8. You got it. That was it. There was no story. There was a story in one line, because that's the story he shares, which is a very moving story of someone who grew up without a mother. Well, my mom's there. I had lunch with her today, right? So that to me is worth at least $500 million.
Now, I would be really interested to bring the conversation briefly towards, typically immigrant families are much more family oriented than Americans. Like, and I'm talking like Americans as in like traditional, like, 40th generation Americans, right? Immigrant families typically have a stronger emphasis on community, raising children in a community, grandparents, parents involved, cousins, aunts, uncles, all of it. How has that impacted you in building a business or building yourself? Because obviously we have the impact of your father's beliefs of, not owing the bank, right? And paying that. Like, there are principles that have showed, but what about the community side of things? Because I feel like that's something we need to get back to as an American country with similar values or similar, principles. Like, you cannot argue the impact of family. You can you could argue politics all day long, but it's like family's still family at the end of the day.
You're so right. And so, as the firstborn to an immigrant family, there's a lot of pressure, right? You don't fit in. Like, I'm 4 years old. I go to kindergarten. I don't speak English. I speak only Greek. Why? Because everyone's speaking to me in Greek. And so for about a few months, I think, I know people are talking to me, but I don't understand what they're saying. And there is no ESL. So now this kid's kind of weird. He's not communicating, right? And today they would give me medication. Right. Right. So back then there's like, okay, he'll get adjusted. And so,
take an Adderall and start speaking English.
I've only taken that pill, I think, once. Someone gave me one of those Adderalls, and it did work. But again, I'm not into prescriptions. I'd rather write my own way. Now, going back to being a kid of an immigrant and community. So as a Greek, not just Greek, but Greek Orthodox Christian, church is part of your upbringing. Right? The original Facebook is Sunday coffee hour. You never know who's going to be there, but if it's a familiar face, you want to talk to them for a few minutes, right? If it's somebody who's tough on you, like your aunt, you still show respect, but how much love can you give someone who's tough on you? But then there's people you've seen your whole life since you were a kid, and they might be 90, right? But you're still going to sit with them, and you're going to have coffee and have a smile, right? And it's just being present and being grateful. Having that message, having that sermon, having that priest who moves people. When I get to see a friend since a kid come back to church and say, you know what, of all the places I've ever been, this guy moves me. I understand more in a few minutes of this guy talking than everyone else has for years. Now I'm going to pay attention more to the message, right? And it's moving. It shows the sacrifices and things that not just the Lord went through, but others went through. And how our community does come together, right? When there's a funeral, right? And sadly there are. I go to them quite often. And guess what? It brings families together. In the last few months, a funeral happens, somebody I know or somebody my parents know, we all go there. Then we have a few hours together. In a way, that's a gift. You're sharing, like, let's say Sunday is a 40-day memorial for somebody who was one of my dad's customers, right? A bartender. He doesn't own the bar, but he knew that my dad has done great work since the 70s. So we were there. I got to hug his mom, be with his kids. I don't even know them that well, but they were happy I was there just to give some love, right? And the same thing with this memorial is you're praying for someone's soul to go to heaven. What do you think that means when they bring fellowship, when they bring food to church? And in Greek, they say psari for the psyche, which means fish for the soul. You're literally eating fish in a communal meal, saying, praying for this person's soul, just like how the Lord brought the fish and the bread and he multiplied it and there were enough for everybody. There's no lack. The lack is in our minds, right? That's sent to us by the adversary. So when we come together as Greeks and believers, not just like the flavor of the day, but the OG church is the Orthodox Church of the apostles. Yeah. And the more people read about faith, this is kind of where they lead. So that's your backbone.
It's fascinating. I've been studying the Orthodox Church lately in the past couple of weeks too, because I feel like part of being a strong man is realizing, and this is something that took me some time, that faith is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. Oh. And that faith is something that, it's not that it's not cool, but I used to run away from. It's like, especially, I think that it's probably the same thing. There's probably a period where you probably left faith and came back to it later in life. I think that's normal. I think that's what most men do. And I would say probably women too, but I feel as if it's like you talk about how having kids or building a community, and how can you do that without a strong backbone? And so the community is the backbone, but deeper than the community, it's the faith, because like the Greek Orthodox Church is one of the most strict churches. The denominations, like there's a reason why it split from Catholicism, because there were disagreements over scripture, and there are things there that, we could talk about that for hours on end. I love it.
Depending on how much time you have, we could just quickly touch on something here. You mentioned the schism, right? So, and then that Orthodox left Catholic. It was kind of like a divorce
over the papacy, right? And the Pope, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah. So you have, again, everyone has a different lens. So the one lens would be like, all right, the Bishop of Rome and then the Bishop of Constantinople have this disagreement of who should be in charge, right? Where, you have Constantine the Great, he moved the empire to Constantinople. So that's basically where the seat of power moved. Back then you had church and state together. And if you ever look at, let's say, the Albanian flag, it's a double-headed eagle. That was the symbol of the Byzantine Empire, where church and state were together, strong, hopefully not corrupt, but the idea of, this is who we are and this is what we do, and we carry ourselves based on these beliefs as strong Christian leaders, not hypocrites, right? Again, there are hypocrites in the class and we can always point them out, but we need to look at our own sins first. And here's a book recommendation to you. This is called Monastic Wisdom from Elder Joseph. So Elder Joseph was a monk on Mount Athos, and he inspired people like Father Ephraim, who's now a saint. Father Ephraim was like the Johnny Appleseed of building monasteries throughout America. So if you ever been to Arizona, Florida, other states, they have monasteries there. They have church at 1 a.m. You should put a day with God. Like this is the devotion they have. They literally say death to the world. They're not putting it down. They're just saying like the glories of this world are they'll fade, right? But if we earn quite a bit of money, we can make donations to these places so that they can pray for us, right? And when I go to some of these holy sites in Greece, I visited this one place on the island of Aegina, in the tomb of Saint Nectarios. I went there when I was a kid, and I went there a few months ago. You hear scratching, you hear knocking. Not that I'm looking for miracles, but they're there. And in other places, there's a whole litany of stories out there. And these are the real superheroes. They're not some Marvel comic book character that changes actor or actress every few years when they make the movie again in a more diluted, woke way. No. Okay. Spider-Man, I know, is the one from the 80s. Okay. The one where I got the comic book. I look at the back. I can give $1 in an envelope and a stamp and get something back, or something that might be a sticker, right? Just something cute, something interactive that forces you to move, right? A story that inspires you. When he kisses Gwen, you're like, oh, maybe one day I'll find my own Gwen, right? Like that, this idea that, You can be an ordinary person and bitten by something that like inspires you to change and metamorphosize into something. It can be inspiring, but let it
Yeah.
be also, let us look to the saints, right? The martyrs, the people who didn't fall into the crowd, but were willing to be thrown into the fire.
Yeah.
And we may enter that in the future where somebody asks you, are you a believer or not a believer? And you say, no, you live today, but your soul might die.
Hmm.
Like where the Lord told Peter 3 times that you will deny me before the
Yep.
rooster crows in the morning. And he did. And then after that, he woke up and said, never again.
Yeah.
Like, so when I go down to the south, I've gone to Tennessee and go to a little farm stand selling watermelon. And I say, you know what? One thing about the South that I love is I don't have to like be shy about love of God or love of Trump. Right. And say, you know what? Like when I went to that rally at Temple, guess what? This is the sign of the cross. Okay, the way the Orthodox do it: Father, Son, Holy Spirit, God, and man. Right. And so
Right.
you can do this. You can do it over anything. Pray over your food. Pray over somebody. I prayed over Trump, and I imagine there's millions of people who pray for him that he's strong, becomes a good leader, and all that stuff, and literally stays alive. Okay, so I don't know if that helped, but maybe all those people helped, and maybe that moved the tides of fate towards good. Because if the
Hmm.
tides of fate move towards bad, we may not even be having this podcast. We may be having a civil war because of
Yeah.
uncertainty. And people don't want to talk about that, but I feel like it, and it's off brand, it's off this, it's off that. But you know what? It's the reality of the day. And I hope we move past this. And that, like you said, we look back 1,000 years and you're like, why were we so divisive? It was fake. We would need to be more.
I feel like it's on brand though. The older I'm getting and the more I'm seeing and witnessing, I believe that it's becoming more on brand than it is off brand, because the leaders of the world have to speak up, just like, the apostles spoke up for their faith, or anywhere throughout history through persecution of any faith. Ultimately, I think that there are so many stories of persecution for multiple faiths, but those were always the leaders who changed something that moved the needle forward in a positive way or in a revolutionary way. And building out your personal brand, I always say that there's a master key to bring this, back and to bring this to a brief close. Is there is a master key, just like Napoleon Hill has the master keys of success, right? Or Charles F. Honnell. I believe that there is one master key to personal branding, and that is that you have to position yourself as a public figure. Now, not all public figures are celebrities. All celebrities are public figures. You can be a public figure in your community. You could be a public figure in your church. You can be a public figure in your business, in your network, whatever it is. But the public figures are the ones that gain the attention for a positive reason, for an outcome. And that is what we need more of on a local level, on a national level, and on an international level. More people speaking up, being vocal, being voices of reason, and having conversations like this to where we're able to talk about a wide variety of subjects and have a free-flowing conversation that is hopefully insightful, impactful, and strategic. And it's something that, now you talked about the content, and part of creating content or putting yourself out there online is so you'll eventually get to the point where people will know you, but you will not know them. And that is a gift and a privilege. And I've been closing almost every interview out with this, because it really is a gift and a privilege to be a leader in any community. And that is something that isn't from a place of narcissism, but out of a place of selflessness, and out of a place of, I have standards that I have to adhere to. And that is the cost of a leader.
Wow. Well, that's definitely profound. Isaac, I really want to thank you for our time here. You definitely exceeded my expectations, and they were already pretty high. So in closing,
Grateful for you, man.
how can people work with you, find you online?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to connect with you?
You could run a Google search on my name, Isaac Mashman, and you can see all of the social sites. My handles are the same across the board at Isaac Mashman. If you'd like to work with me or work with my firm to build out your personal brand and improve the distribution of your IP, launch a podcast, improve it, launch a book, etc., you can reach out at mashmancg.com. mashmancg.com is where you could go there, or reach out to me personally. I'd love to, personally be that person who's able to guide you and give you that strategy moving forward, which I'd love to maybe have the opportunity to call you a client eventually too of MCG, Demetri.
There we go. I mean, that's how progressions happen is one step at a time, seeing where we sync up, seeing where our values align. and seeing where the value is for the opportunity ahead.
Undeniably.
Well, thanks again for your time, and thanks for being on the Relief Podcast, Isaac.
You as well, Demetri. Thank you.